Off we go. Hello everyone. Hi Charlene. Hi Campaign Terrain. Hi Loosely Collected and Quest Board Terrain and Scatter Terrain. Hope you're all doing great. So with me today is Neil from Artisans of Wool. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Karl.
Okay, how are you doing today?
Yeah, great, great.
So, doing okay, good. Yeah, we're all doing good, thanks. So, yeah, Neil, we've been talking for a bit about your 3D modeling and hobbying and stuff, but could you tell us a bit about yourself before we start and how you got into the hobby in the first place?
Cool. Yeah. So, I'm Neil. I live in London in the UK. My I say actual job is I'm a teacher. So, been doing that for about 10 years now. And other than that, I've been playing Warhammer and Games Workshop games since I was 8. So, about 30 odd years at this point. So it's been quite a while. I wandered into a Games Workshop store in Kingston, and the manager there, who was the only person in the shop, was incredibly engaging, and there were all these awesome scenes set up that I was just like, this looks awesome. My mother looked horrified, as back then they not sure they had any really decent training. So the guys started going into this really like grim dark background that as a mother my mum looked absolutely horrified, but as like an 8-year-old kid that liked sci-fi was lapping it up. So I was like, yes, this is amazing. Got like one of those boxes of or like blister packs back in the day. It was like 3 like pewter metal space marines with the hideous plastic arms with like a bolt gun, and then the hand that was perfectly flat so it looked like it was like hovering in midair,
Yeah, I
and
remember
holding the
those.
bolt gun. Glued that together with some super glue, which I managed to like get everywhere and probably stick myself to it more than anything else, and then started painting it with some like paints for aircraft modeling, which was horrible because you painted them and had to leave them for like 12 hours to dry.
You mean like the
And that was,
those enamel kind of the paints? Oh
yeah,
yeah.
they're horrible. And then that was sort of the start of it. And then went back into a Games Workshop and was like, look what I did. And the person was like, come and sit down. We'll do some painting. And then I got introduced. And I'm not a patient person. Like no one would say that I'm patient. So I got introduced to these paints that would drive in about 5 minutes, and I was like, "Yep, that's me. I'm sold. I can actually paint and not wait for 12 hours for it to dry. There's not 100 million little bits in the kit. Yeah, that's me. I'm good." So that was sort of the start of it. So that was second edition. Started with Tyranids with my first army, other than those few Space Marines, and yeah, just carried on from there.
Okay. Oh, I see Dungeon Minister joined us. Hi, Padre. How? But most of your work on your channel is related to 3D modeling and
Yeah,
designing parts for miniatures, which is something I found really interesting because most people who do 3D modeling tutorials usually do it as here's how you make a 3D model of this thing, rather than
yeah,
here is how you make parts for your miniatures for the tabletop.
yeah. I sent you those pictures.
Let's
Like
bring them up.
I, I've I've always loved the side of creating new things, and most of the time it was always adding things to miniatures. One of my sort of, if you actually go to, it might be at the top.
Okay.
There's, I think the first thing is a Thunderhawk. If you actually go back to the file,
Coming up.
this
Yes.
was so this is a photo taken when I was pretty young, working on a carpet, and that's me trying to make a Thunderhawk when you couldn't really Thunderhawks weren't a thing.
Yeah.
Out of plasticard, foam core, stuff like that. So there's some milliput in there and lots of little metal balls to be rivets.
That's a lot
So
of
I've
detail there.
always, yeah, I mean, I've all, yeah, all the panels were done. I don't think I actually ever finished it. I got most of it done, and then this was sort of based off of some pictures that were on like a preview of of the original Forge World one, and I was
You mean
like,
the one that weighed a ton and was almost made entirely out of solid pewter?
no, no, no. This was the one that was made out of the first Forge World one that was made out of resin. They sort of showed some
Oh,
pictures
okay.
of it, I think, and it was like a preview that was way in advance. And I was like, I'm making this. I'll never be able to afford a Forge World one. Like this was me with no money, so I was like, I'm doing this. So I was making it out of plasticard and things like that. So yeah, I've always really loved making things, converting stuff. Like if I had something in an army, it needed to be converted.
Hmm.
Like one of my first Space Marine armies was actually an Ultramarine army where I'd actually true scaled the Terminator legs to make them taller before it was a thing.
Okay.
I haven't got a picture of that on there, annoyingly, but yeah. So that was sort of the stuff that I like doing, and eventually that turned into a, well, I'm going to make this. When there was the Imperial Knights came out, first of all, I was like, I'm going to make this Imperial Knight Power Fist, and you can see that just on the photo there. So that's made out of, well, it was originally plasticard, and then I learnt to resin cast it, homemade a casting pressure chamber,
Oh,
which
whoa, okay.
was interesting, to try and get air bubbles out and stuff like that. It was all a really interesting process, that, like, I think the first time I did it, I destroyed a carpet because I tried doing it inside and I didn't have it fully sealed. So the RTV rubber basically went onto the floor, and that's never coming out of carpet.
Nope.
So that was that carpet gone. And then yeah, so I sort of started casting that up and putting it on eBay just to try and get some monies, because like at that point I think, what was happening? Was I at uni at that point? Either way, I didn't have enough money to be doing doing a lot of stuff like buying Imperial Knights. So that was my way of funding some knights.
Fair enough.
And
Fair
at
enough.
that point, you couldn't get Imperial fists. So you couldn't get fists for the knights. And if you look on the photo, so that's it finished.
See if I
And
can zoom
the
into
one
this.
on, so you can sort of see it painted up. And it was just sort of like this big sort of mechanical chunky fist, not as elegant as the plastic ones that we've got now, but it was just a little bit more like military. To me, it just looked like it would punch something and do some damage. There was no finesse. It wasn't going to pick something up without crushing it. And for me, that's what I wanted in a knight.
I
So I
mean,
was
yeah,
like, yep, that's great.
yeah, that's what it's a giant robot full of guns. It doesn't need fine manipulation.
Yeah. And then I basically made the banner for that and went, man, there's a hole in the top of this. There's got to be something that goes there. Like I'm building a rocket launcher. So the other photo that's on here, you can see basically
This one?
exactly the same thing. I cast up and I made out of plasticard and made this missile launcher that I was like, yep, I'm putting that on the top. And I think I had those for about, I think I'd made those somewhere in the region of like 4 or 5 weeks after the plastic kit first came out. And there was no idea that there was going to be an actual fist on the horizon. I just got that from playing Epic when you had Knights, Knight
Yeah.
Errants had a power fist, and they could have rocket launchers. So I was like, I want a rocket launcher. And then obviously since then they've come out with the rocket launchers. But yeah, that was my first experience trying to sell anything that I'd produced on eBay, which is hilarious. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I mean,
But yeah,
even if it's scratch built part and stuff, it looks really clean, and that's
yeah.
something that I see in a lot
It,
of your work. It's some of the parts you can't really tell the difference between stock part and some of the stuff you made.
Cheers, man. And then yeah, so that led on to, I think if you go up, there's also the Elder Titan. So I wanted an Elder Titan with like a Wraith Blade and a D cannon. So that D cannon is just a D cannon from one of the Forge World models, and then I made the Wraith Blade again. And yeah, I think basically that and the fist and the missile launcher basically was me saving up to try and get some bits 3D printed. Well, I said it was me saving up for random things, then it all just sat there until 3D printing suddenly appeared as a possibility, and you could pay companies in America like Shapeways exorbitant amounts of money to print your 3D prints because you couldn't do it yourself. And that led me on to SketchUp. And yeah, so I started that mostly because I wanted to do Epic. And you've got these little boxy robots were basically my version of the ad mech robots that you could get back when you like in Epic armies.
How long ago
Um,
were we talking about here?
Oh man, when would that have been? Phew, I'm going 7 or 8 years ago,
Okay.
maybe a bit less, maybe 6 years ago. I sort of made those and was putting them in shapeways, but like just printing 4 of them from shapeways, like those 4 little guys. Bear in mind they're like 7 or 8 millimeters
Hmm.
tall. They were like 20 quid from shapeways plus postage. So it was not a cheap thing to do. And then I was making this Mechanicum army, or this not knight, this Titan Legion, and they were the troops for the Titan Legions in Epic. Like you didn't really have infantry. You had these robots, and they were useless. They just didn't really do anything. But at that point, you could steal on eBay, get hold of some of the metal
Hmm?
Titans, like the old metal Titans. But the one that was a bit of a pain to get hold of was the Warlord Titan. And in actual fact, I didn't like the Warlord Titan. I wanted a Warlord Titan that basically looked like this. There was a picture in Imperial armor that had this Warlord Titan that looked like this. It was one of the either Imperial armor or Apocalypse books, and it was just a sketch. And
Hmm.
I was like, I need this in my life. So I designed that on SketchUp. And SketchUp is not the thing to do that on. I mean, it will work. You can do it as I did, and then I sent that away to Shapeways to get printed, and that cost to get that 3D printed cost somewhere in the region of £160 back then.
Not including
It
shipping, I
was
guess, yeah?
yeah, it was crazy. But I mean, they did. I mean, again, this is a long time ago, and they did fantastic quality prints. I mean, there was almost no 3D print lines. You can almost see on his groin bit, you can see some slight lines. Sorry, I'm pointing at my screen like a crazy
Barely, yeah,
person.
I guess.
And that's not 3D print lines. That is the faceting of SketchUp, because SketchUp
Okay.
doesn't deal well with circles. So
Okay.
actually they were amazing prints for the time. They sort of had a slightly grainy texture, but they're fantastic. Um, but to even have a chance of being able to afford 160 quid for one of these guys, and I wanted two, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to cast this up myself. And I had a little bit of experience casting things up, so I cast it up. And again, that went on to, I'm not sure if I actually put that on eBay, but a lot of people got in touch through things like Bolter and Chainsword and stuff like that, and ended up basically making the cost back of that, which was really
Yeah, all
cool.
right.
um and that sort of turned into this, like, i can I can fund my hobby and me doing stuff by just putting things online somewhere. But at this point, you didn't have cults or anything like that.
Mhm.
So I actually did like an Indiegogo campaign for some city walls for Epic.
Which are
And
down
where are they?
here, I
They're there.
guess, yeah?
Yeah. So you've got those. Again, this is SketchUp. So a very long process went into making those. And again, they had to be 3D printed from the US. And you can sort of see where they are. And then I sent them off to some guy in, I think it was Poland, to cast them up. And I have to admit, his casting was not the best. Like if you look at the bottom, especially on over to the left, you can sort of see there's like
Yeah, a
some
few,
wear and
yeah.
tear. But I mean, these are big things. Like, so I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I think he
mean,
did about as good as you could do.
the Warhound Titan is, if I'm not mistaken, it's about this big, more or less.
Well, that no, because this is for Epic still.
Oh, okay.
So that Warhound Titan is, there used to be a thing for, if you played Epic, that got referred to as forumware, and if you knew the right people on the right forums, you could find stuff.
Oh.
And one of them was this metal Warhound Titan, which is probably about 3/4, maybe 4/5 of the size of the current Adeptus
Okay.
Titanicus Warhound Titans. So you sort of get the idea of it and how big it is. But it was pretty. It was good fun. I'm trying to think if I don't even know if you can show. There we go. I've actually got. You can still find. Oh, maybe you can't. There we go. And let me just copy that. I'll put that in the stream link. But Indiegogo, because they keep everything, that is the link to my first ever
Okay,
project.
let me bring it up.
That was my first ever sort of experience with trying to do anything on this sort of
Coming up.
scale. And most of it wasn't, I mean, I did the designs, but most of it was this casting guy. And you can sort of see what everything looks like. But if you go down, you can see sort of what happened. And if you go further down, there's more pictures with like 6mm tall models and things like that. So, or hopefully it is. So you can see more pictures of it. But that was my sort of first thing.
Ah, here we go.
And yeah, I mean, it was really good fun. It was really good fun. It was a great experience, a lot of time, but that effectively funded my first 3D printer.
Okay.
Eventually, which was really cool. So that was basically everything building up until it got to the point where I could suddenly had this money and was like, 3D printers suddenly came out, and I bought my first Anycubic Photon, which is compared to nowadays was tiny, but it was the only thing that you could really afford. Other 3D printers like Elegoo and Frozen really weren't on the market that much, and the only other option was like a form printer, which was running into like multiples of thousands of pounds.
What's a
So I was like,
form printer?
let's give it a go.
What's a
And
form printer exactly?
sorry, what was that?
I said, what's a form printer? I'm not sure I know what it is.
So they are a halfway between commercial and home 3D printing. Like their 3D printers are, I'm not sure now you'd consider them amazingly good, but back then they were the thing that you would aspired to get.
Okay.
But they were expensive. Like the form, whatever it was at the time, was I think about £3,000 or £4,000. I haven't really looked at what they do now, but they now cater more towards industry. So they do like resin printers, sort of about 4 or 5 years ago, that are absolutely massive. Like you could 3D print entire motorbike helmets on and stuff like that. So they did a lot of really cool stuff. But that was I will never be able to afford this. So I got an Anycubic Photon and sort of got designing, and then realized that that was sort of the point where I decided that SketchUp was only going to get me so far. As soon as you want to go past architecture and you want to do round things, you're suddenly needing to go into other stuff. So I got into Blender, and then made the mistake of trying to design some infantry as my first sort of thing. And that's
Like,
where
yeah.
that's where these heavy exo armor models came in, and these were the first. Other than like making a cube, moving a cube, this was the first sort of stuff that I did in Blender.
Yeah,
And
let's try starting simple.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I started with the torso, and that torso probably took me somewhere in the region of like, like tens and tens of hours, with things constantly going wrong. I was on a computer that really couldn't handle it, so it was not good. It was a very interesting process. Like the trim is all different thicknesses around the sort of the lower bit on his chest, sort of his abdomen area. It was just a mess. It was hilarious, but I learned a massive amount. But what was interesting is like I was trying to learn everything from people that were like YouTube, but
Mhm.
everyone on YouTube was doing 3D design for CG work. So
Exactly, yeah,
everything,
yeah.
subdivision surface, things like that. And then they put everything together and it doesn't work as a 3D model. Now, nowadays, you can actually get away with a lot more for 3D models. Like most 3D printing software, you can put things in with some errors and it will kind of fix it for you, unless you've done a lot wrong. But this was like, we were discussing it earlier, like sort of Blender 2.7 or 2.8. It was maybe 2.8. And it was, at that point, all the 3D printing software was like, I mean, Box wouldn't fix things for you. I'm not sure Lychee even existed back then. And it just wouldn't fix anything. So actually, I mean, there was probably just fixing this so it would print probably took about 15 to 20 hours
Oh,
at that point, because it was you just could have nothing wrong with it, and everything had to be in triangle. It was horrible. But it was the first time everything got printed off. It suddenly was like, this is really worth it, like so worth it. And I painted them up as imperial fists. There's I haven't put a picture of those on there. They're on my Instagram. But yeah, so I painted them up as imperial fists,
Let me see
and
if I
there was
picked
just
up
this.
a picture of. No, I don't think no, I don't think there was one. But
Yeah. So
yeah,
anyway, I printed them up as imperial fists and was just like, there's just this weird point, and I don't know if other people that have done 3D design and 3D printing have done this, maybe just 3D printing, where everything's a 3D print and like it doesn't feel like much. It doesn't feel like a miniature. It doesn't feel like something you've gone out and bought. And obviously you haven't gone out and bought it. But there was a point where I think I sort of base coated it and was starting painting details where I picked it up and suddenly was just thinking of it like it was a miniature that I'd purchased. And it was a really, really weird feeling where you suddenly just go, oh, like I've made this, not just a little bit from scratch. Like this isn't been added to. This is just totally me. And it was an awesome feeling. Like it sort of harks back to when I was making things out of plasticard, and I was like, man, this was nothing before. It was just some sheets, and now it's something. Or like when you're making that first ever bit of terrain, and you're
yeah,
like,
yeah. I know the feeling.
I can't buy this. Like, I can't buy this at all. There's nowhere I can get this from, and this is unique. And it's sort of like when you got those really like back in the day where Games Workshop did these like make your own terrain out of whatever trash that you had in the house. It was like that, except for you hadn't even made it out of trash. It'd come from nothing. It was on your computer, and there was like I didn't have to rely on certain parts being certain shapes to be able to go onto the model. There was something really special about it, and it just sort of took me, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is me, I'm done. And from that point on, I was just like, yeah, I just want to make things. And effectively just made almost entirely, if I make something, it's because it's something I want to use. At this point, I wanted some Terminators that were larger scale because I was true scaling miniatures by cutting their legs up and making them taller. And I wanted something to use as Terminators that were taller, and I didn't like the sort of now there's new Terminators and they're not doing it, which look awesome. But the original Terminator, like squatting, legs really wide
Yeah.
pose, like this model had, but like I'd spent a lot of time building this on a reference background image. So
Okay.
there's actually a human shape behind this. So the legs are where they should be. The arms aren't coming out of the head and stuff like that. There, even though the shoulders look massive, the actual join point is lower than the neck would be, and things like
Yeah,
that. So
rather than the
it should,
Terminators, which are like,
yeah,
yeah,
like hunchback. So it should, even though it's like this old Terminator pattern that's got crazy, ridiculous looking shoulders, there's something about the proportions for me that works better. And that suddenly I was like, yeah, this is just brilliant. So I started doing things like that, and just if there was something I was making, I would add to it. And at this point, Titanicus was coming out, and you got the plastic warhounds and reavers and things like that. But I mean, I was playing Titanicus, but my massive love was Epic. And at that point, like, so these are all Imperial Fists for Epic.
hmm
Um, and you needed certain things for that. Like you wanted a Titan, but they could have weapons that didn't exist in Titanicus. Like you get this assault pod that was really useful because it would carry Terminators.
I think it's this one.
So
I
you got that
think.
there. There's actually a better picture of that on the file that I sent you because since then I've changed the way that I do the graphics of the things, so the edge is a bit more clear. So like I wanted this thing because it was the main thing if you had a Warlord Titan that this could carry some Terminators in it or some other things. And
Wait, just one sec, because I'm not that familiar with recent Epic. So basically, this is a battering ram that they put through other
yeah,
things, and then little guys
so
come out
this
of
was
it.
on its arm. It's a battering ram. I sort of just went with, well, if it's a battering ram, it needs to have some melters on it. So it's got these melter guns to melt
Yeah, yeah, why
through
not?
the idea of it. It smashes in and then basically disgorges all the Terminators out. And that was the idea of it. And there were loads of other weapons that you couldn't get, like las cutters were a big thing, and plasma burners if you wanted a warlord that was good in close combat for epic, and they just didn't exist. So I was like, well, I'll just make them. And I was putting them on random different forums, and people were like, well, I want this. And I was like, yeah, but do you play epic? They're like, no, I'm playing Titanicus. Yeah, but you can't use it into Titanicus. We'll make up some rules. It's fine. So I started putting them on CG Trader originally, and then Cults. And it was, yeah, I've never really got into this thing of making. There's a big thing in the 3D community of, well, for some people, like an almost screw Games Workshop approach. I'm doing this so I don't have to buy the models. And while I do that sometimes, most of the time for me, it's I want something I can't get. So I'm going to make something that adds on to a model. So for example, or like the Land Raider Spartan came out, and then the Typhon variant came out, but you can't get the other gun to go with it. You have to buy a whole extra tank. So I was like,
Oh,
well, this is silly. I'm just going to build one that I can put on. I'm not just going to copy the same design. So I made this like triple plasma cannon that I was like, I'll count that as the other weapon, and it looks cool. And yeah, it just sort of worked from there. It was just making these add-ons and things that people, well, I say people, things I wanted, and if people wanted them, great. If people didn't want them, didn't really care. I'm making them anyway. They're the things that I want to make, and that's sort of just been my mentality of
yeah,
generally, if I want it,
uh,
other people are going to want it.
yeah, I was quite surprised when you mentioned it because this really looks like some professional level stuff. But we have a question from Loosely Collected who's saying, question for Neil, what would you recommend for people that want to learn to 3D sculpt for printing? Like where to start
Right.
and where to learn stuff.
So, now it depends what you mean by sculpt. Like, so for example, I mean, most of my stuff is hard surface, so it's buildings, vehicles, armor. There are a lot of programs out there. I obviously like Blender. Blender is fantastic because it will do everything. You can sculpt on it, and people will make fantastic organic sculptures. You can do hard surface modeling. It's amazing. But there are issues with Blender. The biggest issue with Blender is that it does everything. It will do hard surface model, it will do sculpting, it will do animation and rendering, and a lot of people use it for computer graphics. And like even some studios are starting to use it more and more, which means it's really intimidating. Like it looks like there's a horrible amount to it. And admittedly, my biggest mistake of doing those Terminators first was actually a bit of a blessing, because it just meant that I could be searching to do something. That's the weapon for the
Hmm.
Spartan, so the extra weapon that can go on. But yeah, it's quite intimidating to start. I'm going to be really honest. Like Blender, when you start it, feels quite daunting. But a lot of the things that are out there that you can learn from are, and what I was learning from was from Facebook. Sorry, not from Facebook, from YouTube, and it was all based on CG work. So there was a lot of like the techniques are the same, but if it's going to 3D print, suddenly you have to deal with it in a totally different way. If you want something simpler, there's programs like 3D Builder. There's also a program that's come out recently called Plasticity, which is quite cool, but it has limits for 3D printing. Like if you want to go into it for certain things, it works quite well. But I've left plasticity alone quite intentionally. In fact, I've got a video coming out on why I don't use plasticity. But Blender's great, and if you want to look into how to do Blender, I mean, the biggest. I mean, people know me for the models, but a lot of more people know me from my YouTube channel, which looks at how to use Blender for 3D design for 3D printing, because there just wasn't anything out there at the time that I started it, and there's still not much now. So I was like, I learned a lot from YouTube, but had to put in a lot of trial and error to make it work. So I was like, well, I was like, I should just put this up. What actually happened is someone asked me how to make something that I'd put up, and I basically made them a short video, and they were like, you should put this on YouTube. And I was like, no one wants this on YouTube. And they were like,
Yes,
no,
they do.
you should
Yes,
put
they
this
do.
on YouTube. Yeah. So I was like, fine then. Okay, yeah, go on then. I'll work out how to edit this, and got some free software to edit it and put up my I think actually it ended up being my second video on YouTube. I did one for about settings and stuff for 3D printing, and 3D design for 3D printing, and put that up, and it's still there. It's on radial arrays, and it makes like a double barreled chain gun almost, and man, I look back at it now, and it was only a year and a half ago, actually, but it's really bad. Like, I'm sort of stuttering my way through it, and there's some really bad cut edits, and it's awful. But yeah, so if you are looking to get into Blender, there's that. It all the video, like, I will always keep all of my videos free. I learn everything that I know from free videos and trial and error, so I will keep all of the videos I have for free. Like, I have a Patreon page that's just because some people were like, dude, we really appreciate this, can we give you some money? And it was an easy way to do that, and some people wanted the 3D files, so I could do it that way as well. But there will never be anything that's on the Patreon that's not later going to come out on YouTube, because I just think everything should be free. So if you are interested in Blender, there's the Artisans of All YouTube page, and hopefully it'll cover everything you need. It's got a quite nice sort of beginner tutorial once you know the basics of how to make a set of bases. And even if you're not interested in making bases, it covers pretty much every tool you're going to need to start with. And then after that, it's looking up very specific things that you want to do. But it covers all the things you need to do about moving, putting things relative to each other, the modifiers you're going to use, like using arrays and booleans, and then some of the tricks to fix problems. So it's a pretty good starting place. So yeah, if you're interested in Blender, that would be my advice. Go and look at my channel, because it's going to be better than that. But actually, on a more serious note, like, most of the stuff that I learned was from a YouTube channel by a guy called Grant Abbott, and he is definitely doing it for CG work. But I love his pacing, and I love the way he teaches, and I love his just mannerisms. He's just got a very nice way. When you watch his channel, you just sort of feel at ease, and it's a really nice thing. And then there's another channel by a guy called Josh Gambrell, who's part of him and another guy make a series called or part of a group called Blender Bros, and they make some fantastic tutorials. They're a little bit more advanced, is the wrong word, sometimes a little bit faster. But some of Josh's stuff, especially his earlier things, like if you go back a year or two, like, the tutorials are absolutely amazing, looking at how to do specific things. So yeah, I mean, I will always champion Blender, because I think it's an amazing bit of software, and it's free. Like, they give it away for free, which I can never believe. You look at things like all of the other 3D sort of design software, and it's hundreds of pounds. So yeah, that would be my go-to.
And yeah, speaking of your channel, the first time I found, I think I was looking for something like because I needed to use an array modifier to make some threads in a wheel in a tire.
Yeah.
And the first thing that struck me about the channel was it's really easy to understand what this guy is talking about. You know?
That's good. That's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah, that's really I guess that's the professional teacher coming through.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of probably had that a little bit as an advantage. And what's even more ironic about it is that, as much as lockdown was hell for everyone, it actually taught me quite a lot about teaching online, because suddenly
Oh,
you're
okay.
doing
Yeah.
things in a very different way. Because I had to teach my students online, and we're making sort of videos for students to show them how to do things. Like, I'm a geography teacher, so you're trying to teach, like, 11-year-olds how to measure distances on maps and things like that online, and like getting some cameras that are sort of panning down and using a ruler and things like that. So yeah, I think that helped quite a lot. And like, my channel does, if you're a teacher, you always get taught to teaching, you should do three things. You should tell someone what you're going to teach them, then teach it to them, and then tell them what they've learnt. And if you watch my channels, like, I sort of just got into that, and I kind of sort of can't fall out of it now, and it's sort of just the way I do it now. But like, all of my videos are the classic, this is what you're going to learn, now we're going to learn it, and and now I'll tell you what you've learned. So yeah, you can, there's people that have messaged me and be like, "You're a teacher, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Yes, we can tell." And I was like, "Yeah."
Sorry. So actually, I
But
had
yeah.
two other questions about your. Is about your channel. Uh, I noticed most of the stuff you do is either Imperial or Space Marines or
Yeah.
stuff like that. So why is it called Artisans of Vol? Why isn't that kind of an elder thing? Why why
So
go ahead?
no, right. So that's a really good question. So the when I actually started, and this is a long time ago, and this is sort of where the name came from. I was trying to make some things for Eldar,
Okay.
and you couldn't do that in SketchUp. It was impossible
Mm.
to do that in SketchUp. So I wanted to make some Eldar stuff. And Vol, being the elder god of creation, seemed like cool. This would be a good name. And I started using it somewhere else. I can't remember what it was. I think it was on a forum, basically. And it was for Eldar things, and I was making some Eldar stuff, like that Titan. So some of it was by hand, and there were sort of other little bits that I was making as well. Most of it by hand. And sort of the name just stuck because the person that first asked me to show them how to do something was from one of the forums, and I got speaking to them through doing Eldar things.
Okay.
So I just sort of kept the name. Um, and yeah, it just sort of stuck from there, which is I'm pretty impressed with that, Carl, because most people have no clue where the name comes from. They're like, "What the hell is a Vol?" Um, so yeah, but yeah, so there's not a huge amount of Eldar stuff on there. I do actually keep meaning to do some more Eldar stuff, and actually about 3 months ago, I was
Mhm.
looking at starting an Eldar army. And then there was going to be, I'd obviously be making Eldar things because the channel's whatever I'm doing. And then 10th edition came out, and just from the preview, Eldar looked broken as hell. And I just didn't want to be that guy that had that army that everyone was like, "What are you doing?" So I was like, I'll put that idea to the side. So, which I've especially feel glad about, because the Eldar models that I've got in my in my stash, the first one is a Wraith Knight, and they're meant to be the most broken things that you can possibly get. And the other things that I've got for an Elder army is my past Elder army were a lot of uh, Wraithguard and Warlords and 6 D-cannon batteries, which were also broken as hell. So in the new edition, so I was like, "Yep, this was the right choice. I'm not doing that." And then yeah, so that basically there's some tutorials on how to make sort of Elder-like things, and I do actually want to make some different weapons for a knight, an Elder knight, but I just haven't done. I've never just got round to it at that point. Though if you have a look at the photos that I sent you, there is, and this was done on SketchUp, there is actually a epic Dark Elder Tantalus. I think it's towards the top. That so yeah, the
The
Dark
barge
Elder
here, yeah.
Bard. That was 3D design. I 3D designed that on SketchUp. This rounded shapes are not what SketchUp is good at, and
Okay.
this was hell. And this was printed by Shapeways. Again, this was before you get it. So this was my sort of barge, and this was the model. This model is the model that got me to start using Blender, because I posted this up, and someone was like, "Wow, that's awesome. How did you design that? Did you make it by hand?" I was like, "No, I 3D designed it." And they were like, "Oh wow, that's really cool. What did you use?" And I was like, "SketchUp." And they were like, "What? Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, the infantry on there aren't designed by me; they're from another company, but the rest of the body is. And yeah, they were like, "You're insane. Why would you do this on SketchUp? How long did it take?" And I was like, "It took quite a long time to do this, because it's just really not meant for rounded shapes. So all of that rounded bit that you've got at the front, well, not rounded, but the sort of undulating body of
Yeah.
that, and then the beams as well, that had to be made section by section, like almost every single little bit. You got a layer there of vertices in that shape. Then I had to copy it, move it out, change its size slightly to make it bigger, and then go on and slightly make it smaller. It took forever, but I love those models. I was always really, really happy with them, because it was just such an impossibility to do in SketchUp. And then someone's like, dude, Blender's much better with round objects. You might want to have a look at Blender. So yeah, that was that was that. So that was the model that convinced me that Blender might be the way to go, because that was not a fun design process making
Yeah,
that
it does
thing.
sound painful. I mean, which is appropriate for Dark Elder, but you know.
Yeah, yeah. They got their they got their pain tokens from me. Trust me.
So let's
But
see.
yeah, so I've just never got around to doing lots of Eldar things, which is a bit of a shame actually, because it'd be quite nice to. The other slight problem with Eldar is, which is a 3D creator you've always got to be a bit careful of, is um, they're a very recognizable design. They're not like Space Marines are a space. It's a space knight. A robot is a big robot. Like Eldar are very. There's not a lot of other places where you
Yeah,
get something
they're
that looks
quite
like
unique as
something
far as
Eldar.
things go. Yeah.
Yeah. So making a model from scratch would be a little bit risky, because we all know that certain companies can be a little bit litigious.
Yeah.
So I sort of left it alone, but I've always wanted to make some add-on bits for a Night Titan. I thought that would be really
Yeah.
fun.
I think.
But yeah, just haven't got around to it. And with 10th being the way it is, I don't think anyone wants anyone encouraging people to be using Night Titans right now. So maybe it's for the best that I don't.
Okay, so let's see. Scattertain is saying sounds like the Sesame Street formula. I think she's talking about the what you're going to learn, how to do it, and this is what you learn thing. But yeah, I mean, Sesame
Yeah.
Street was a great educational system. And I did have another question for you. Do you have a background in arts? Because I was seeing some of the painting you were doing on these pictures was some freehand stuff. I think was literally mind blowing. Stuff like this, for example.
Yeah, no, not at all. The last time I did art was of any description other than painting, was for, well, when I would have been in year 9, so what I've been 14.
Okay.
That was the last time I did anything art related. I sort of got just taken in a different way, but it's always been there as a hobby. So it's sort of just been the thing that you do. But everything I've learned has either been learned on forums, trial and error, or YouTube. And I think we're just really lucky to be in a community where people are just so really willing to share
True.
what
Yeah.
they do and their techniques. So yeah, that was yeah, most of it's just sort of learnt by trial and error and other people showing you what to do, which is great. But no, not nothing artistic, unfortunately.
But
That's my
I
that's
have.
probably one of the that isn't my paint job,
Okay.
to be clear. That's someone else's paint job. They sent me the picture of it because they'd printed. In fact, they were one of the first to print the sponsons out,
Yeah,
because
the quad lasers here. Yeah.
yeah, they'd requested some sponsons that were like the old school epic versions, where they actually come out the side in a bit more of a World War One styly tank,
Uh,
as opposed to the current ones, which look a little bit more automated. So yeah, and they sent that picture, and I was like, man, this looks intimidating as hell.
does yeah.
What a great paint job! So straight away, I had to put that up, because that was just great.
And what about? Let me think. Yeah, yeah, this one.
Yeah, so that's mine. That's mine. So that was, again, like the and this is just the thing. I mean, if you've the thing that you need to do is like, for me, if there's something you like and there's something you want, what's great about 3D design is that you can make it. So, for example, the Warbringer Titan, the only time the Warbringer Titan was ever mentioned before Games Workshop brought this model out was a really old piece of art. And in that old piece of art, it's got some weird gun on one side that looks like it might be a fusion gun, but you're not quite sure. And
Okay.
this massive missile launcher on its other arm. And and I saw the artwork and was like, I need these weapons in my life. So started 3D designing them, because everyone loves a massive rocket pod. So I was like, yeah, go for it. And that was, again, I mean, that was an odd project, because normally it's because I want to use something in a game, but there's no rules for a War Master in Epic, and it was just based on some art where I went, that's cool. I want something like that.
How do you get this design on here? Is it like built it up using transfers or freehand or
That is just one transfer. That is one
oh,
transfer.
nice.
So that
Okay.
is the knight. What is it? Tyrannus? No, not that's the Tyrannus. Is the thing Tempestus? Is the Tempestus Legion, and they were wiped out. If you read any of the Warhammer 40,000 books, they got wiped out on Mars trying to defend the against the forces of chaos, and they basically got on the wrong side of it and got totally destroyed. So yeah, but they have this really cool like blue color scheme, but it's meant to be a blue. It's meant to be a blue camo color scheme, but I didn't like the sort of. It's meant to almost be like dotty like camo, and I didn't quite like that, so
Okay.
I just went with this sort of slightly mottled color. And I've used that for pretty much any knight. If I do a Titan, I like the sort of mottly blue. I just think it's got a really cool look to it.
It does.
It's a lot of fun. I just think it looks great. So yeah, or went with that for that.
Okay, and there was another one of these. Yeah, this one. This one just looks.
Yeah, that was that. I mean, to be fair, that is all Games Workshop model except for that was when I was like, yeah, I need to make a base. So I made the base out of. So that's a 3D printed base. That's him walking down some steps. But that was a really fun project. That was me just again wanting to do something. I was like, you know what? I don't know how to paint OSL. I've never painted OSL before. I'm going to learn some OSL. So was just like he's got a plasma
So
flamer on
wait,
his
wait, wait, wait.
arm.
This was your learning piece. This is how you learned. Okay, I mean, like jump in and the deep end and everything, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, every single thing I do. I mean, I'd done a couple of little bits before, but nothing great. And actually, like the OSL on it on the guy, the fire on the guy isn't bright enough, and actually, the blue goes too dark. Like the blue is darker than anything that should naturally happen because it's going on to white, and things like that. And to be fair, this is just like there's lots wrong with it, but the thing that's great about this as a project was that like when I put this up on forums and things like that, people were really helpful. Like that people can be so, not everyone, like there's almost this thing on forums nowadays that people are scared to give good feedback because some people can take it so personally. But one of the best things that I've ever found about YouTube and things like that, where it's not forums, because they are always a bit slow. Um, like YouTube and things like that, you'll get feedback so quickly. And if you go on things like Evian Metal or something like that, they are like you get some people on there that are painting for Golden Demon, and
Yeah.
they're amazing. And if you ask for constructive criticism, you get some amazing feedback from people. Like, for example, that the blue's too dark blue, and I was like, just looked at it a bit more and was like, damn, yeah, you're right. And it wasn't something that I was going to be offended on. I definitely wasn't going to go and try and change it because it's sort of part of the learning process to get things wrong. But at the same time, this was also me trying to do so this is actually a true metallic gold. So it's not actually non-metallic
All right.
metal. So that's actually gold, but with oil paints and stippling and various other things. So
Okay.
that is
All right.
actually metallic paints. So
Yeah, I was
it's
wondering how
sort
you
of
got that effect because it looks really interesting.
Yeah, because there was like a while ago, there was again some pictures of someone, I think it was in one of the Forge World books, where they had this like really gritty looking gold, and I was like, oh, I love that. And then I looked at it really closely and was like, no, this is actually metallic. It's not non-metallic metal. I was like, damn. And just sort of started inventing how I thought it might be done. And it sort of started with a leg, and then again, people were really useful online. They were like, well, maybe this should look like this, or have you tried doing this? And I sort of started using different oil paints and things like that, and doing stippling with sponges and bits like that. This was one of my, I really loved this project. It was probably one of my most, for me, one of my greater painting accomplishments. Even though there's things wrong with it, it was just a lot of stuff that I was trying for a first time that just came off. It was really, it was a lucky accident for a person that's not particularly professional at painting. So yeah, that was really good fun.
I mean, when I see this, I don't say, "Oh, there are mistakes here." I mean, this looks amazing.
Cheers, man.
Okay, I have another question from Loosely Collected. 1 second, let me find the window again. Here. Are the printed parts glued in or magnetized so they can be swapped out?
If it's for me, if what was that quote? On Big Bang Theory, there is a quote where it says something along the lines of everything's better with Bluetooth. For me, everything's better with magnets. If you can magnetize it, I magnetize it. So every single Titan that I've got is magnetized. On that model that you were just showing, both the arms are magnetized. It can be swapped out for other arms.
This one, yeah?
Well, the one that you were just showing with the blue, with the non-metallic metal,
Oh,
sorry,
right.
the OSA blue, the arms on that are magnetized. I can swap them out. Like
Okay,
this was never designed for anything other than a gaming piece. Like I've played games with this, so
nice.
this is my gaming stuff. This is also why I never finish armies. Just as a side note, it's a running joke with my friends that I never ever finish painting an army ever, because I'll always be doing stuff like this where I'm like, it's a new army. I better try something new. So this was like, I'm doing new metal and I'm going to do new OSL. So I never finish anything. But yeah, pretty much if I build something, it normally gets magnets. Sometimes sometimes I'll put them in 3D designs. If people are buying the 3D designs, sometimes I won't. If you have a look on your set of photos that you've got there, just down where you've got the plasma, it's the fusion gun you've got, I think, or the bottom one there.
This one?
So that one, all of these guns that go on the Typhon chassis, all of those just fit in. You don't even need magnets. I just lift them out and put them back in, which is really cool. The only thing that's magnetized is the front armor bit. So all of these models, so you've got the fusion gun there, all of them are exactly the same tank. I just take the thing out and put the next one in. It's probably the most photo tank on my collection because every gun's just being put on it. So yeah, most things I magnetize because magnets are awesome.
So just
So, yeah.
replacing that part, yeah?
Yeah. So literally it just fits out and fits in. That doesn't even need a magnet. I've made it so I can literally lift it out and put it in and then take the other one out. And it
this
sits
part is magnetized, you said.
and then that bit's magnetized.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's just there's a little shield on the front. So yeah, love magnets. If I can magnetize it, always will.
Oh, yeah.
Who wants a tank with only one weapon option? Like, you want to be able to change.
Yeah, true story. Oh yeah, and I also wanted to ask you about this. Is this also meant for a gaming piece? Because I mean that's some amazing detail, but why?
Yep. Again, this is why I don't finish armies, because I will do stuff like I'm the person that will paint the things that you'll never see because it's on the bottom of the tank. Like when people are raging that the Roggle Dawn tank doesn't have a plate at the bottom. For me, I was like, I'm not going to write stuff about it online, but god damn, that irks me. Like I need to know that my tank works. So this is actually, this is going to be for I've just sort of started doing Imperial Knights, because I needed an army that wasn't Eldar for 10th edition, and I hopefully could also use in Horus Heresy. So I was like, and had a low model count, so Knights were pretty high on the list. But what's the point in having an army if you don't add some detail to it? So I was like, yeah, you know what? 99% of people are never going to see that there's a rifle barrel, but I'm going to know that it's there. So I'm doing this. So it just seemed a bit of fun. So yeah, so I've got that printed. That's going to go on a Knight. But I'm thinking of actually entirely designing the weapons from 3D designing the weapons because you don't get enough. So that was sort of a starting point. And I was mentioning to someone, and they were like, "You need to do a video on how you're doing a rifle barrel." And I was like, really? And they were like, yes. Like, but no, like I know how ridiculously pedantic I am about details. I was like, look, I want this. I'm not sure anyone else wants this. Like, I'm just doing it because I want it. And they're like, no, just do the video. I was like, fine, okay, whatever.
No,
But yeah. So,
but I mean, you could find other applications for the exact same technique in a bunch of places. So
yeah,
yeah, I
definitely.
can see that would be useful.
Yeah. But yeah, most of my projects are that. Like, let's just do something stupid. No one's gonna know it's there, but I will. It's fine. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So let's see, while we're at it, 1 second, just doom 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 doom. Yes, I was going to ask about this one because again the blue one, this is really good.
So that was me in my I want to learn to do non-metallic metal phase. So
Okay.
again, that was just like I said, never finish armies, but if I see an awesome model, I'm like, yeah, let's just do something with it. And I loved the Maniscalco model. I just thought it looked absolutely awesome, but was in a horrible pose. So I was like, right, let's repose it to look like it's doing something a bit more mean. And then I will paint this up, and then I mean, the non-metallic gold is not particularly good. The non-metallic blue I'm quite happy with, or just the extreme highlight blue I'm pretty happy with. But yeah, that was just a really nice, fun project. And again, 3D printed base was because again, why not make things harder for yourself? So yeah, so that's a 3D printed base just to see what it can do, and to see if basing was an option from a resin printer, which it turns out it is, and a lot of people seem to do that nowadays.
Okay.
So that's why that was one of my sort of first tutorials, was like how to make bases, because it seems like quite a good beginner thing to do, because it's very generic for any army, and like I said, it's got all the skills you need. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Whenever I see a Magnus Calgary model, it doesn't matter which edition they make it from. I can't stop myself from thinking about the second edition one. Do you remember the one?
Is that is that far enough back that he was sitting on what looked like a toilet?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And the artwork that goes with it, where he's got his hands on his legs, and he
Yes.
just looks like he just looks very unhappy. Yeah, I mean, second ed's so funny, because you've got some models that, like, I don't know if you remember. There's a similar thing of the first Gene Stealer Patriarch that's a model
That's on a throne
for a
kind of thing, yeah.
Patriarch is on a throne, and that was in second edition. And it's just so funny because, man, some of that art and some of the models were hilarious, but also some of the art and some of the models were just amazing. Like the second edition codexes were just, I don't, if it wasn't for the second edition codexes, I don't think I'd be into Warhammer 40,000 the way I am. Just the backstory about them was just amazing, and the Tyranid one was just like, that might be the perfect codex. It was just beautiful. Like it was just so good. Did you play in second edition, or do you know?
I still play mostly in second edition because
Oh,
I tried
really?
a little third edition. I think I played a little sixth or seventh maybe, but by that time the rules had changed so much. It's like I don't really enjoy this. But second edition for me is
Second
like
edition. Second edition's
explosions and
great.
vehicles and stuff.
Yeah, like me and a group of friends every so often, like once every couple of years, we'll have some sort of second edition, like small scale game, because otherwise it will take forever. But yeah, that edition was just, it was such a nice mix of detail, and like all the codexes were so thorough, and they had several different armies, and the Nid codex always got me because it was, all of the little stories in it are great. And actually, when you then read all the little stories in it, they're actually one ongoing story of an invasion, a Tyrian invasion of a planet, that starts with like an Imperial Guard patrol getting slowly taken out by a lictor, and then there's only one guy left who makes it to the base and is like, I made it, and then realizes that that was what the lictor was doing to try and find out where the base was. And then this whole like invasion just comes over this base. They were so good. And the artwork at the time by was it Mike Gibbons, whoever MG was and signed his work, MG,
Mark
was
Gibbons, yeah,
just,
I believe, yeah.
yeah,
Is
it
it
was
Mark
just
or Mike? Yeah, Mark.
amazing, Mike.
Yep.
But honestly, they were that artwork, like the Eldar Elder Aspect Warriors and the Elder Avatar of Cain, where it's like that, just looking absolutely raging,
Come at
was
me.
just
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, and there's one that was in from these, that probably the bit of artwork, and this will be my, I've never seen a bit of artwork that's just caught my imagination
Mhm.
as much of this. Oh, I wonder if I could. Yeah, it was just so good. Was the in the main box you had the rule book, then
Mhm.
you had the war gear book, and then you had a book
The
that was
Codex
called
Imperialis.
Codex Imperialis, and it had a little bit of each of the different
Yeah.
like armies. And in that there was a story and a picture of a Primarch fighting a Space Marine Terminator librarian, and it was the best bit of artwork
Is
I
it
could. It was,
is it Gene Stealer Patriarch fighting and the librarian is bleeding out of his something?
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like
that's the
sort
one.
of
Yeah.
like down and looks totally defeated, and then it's got a story with it about how this like librarian is just basically trying to desperately delay the Patriarch so that an orbital bombardment can destroy this citadel that, well, this like cathedral that they've nested under, and like everything goes together so perfectly. I love that bit of artwork, and I mean the imagery from Games Workshop has always been something that I think is
Yeah,
just
no kidding.
absolutely superb. And that's like, some people very 3D printery when they're like, yeah, like I said, I just want to 3D print things, and I'm like, I'm not there. I will do if I can't get something at all, but I'm gonna make add-ons because I want little bits, but I'm not gonna copy something that someone at Games Workshop's already made. Not really not from a personal thing of, I think they're gonna try and sue me. They probably would. I mean, they're fairly litigious, and I know people have got in a lot of hassle or had a lot of things happen to them. But more just from a, well, it's their designs. I'm just helping with a little bit of extra detail that you can't get. And you know what? If I had something that I designed and then someone put it out on like Forge World, I'd take down the design that's there, because you know what? Like I I need this company to exist because I
Yep.
like their background and I like what they do and I really enjoy it, and I love well, most of the Horus Heresy books I love. There's a few duff ones, but they're just great. And yeah, so it's just something that I've always enjoyed.
Okay, in the meantime, I see that Earthman Brick has joined us in the chat. Hi, Steve. And he's saying, I hear you talking fondly about second edition, but I don't see any obnoxiously green painted bases in either of your armies. Just saying.
Yeah, I know. There's Yeah. In fact, basing is one of the things that I've always been like, I want my models to have, because the first few models I did, man, they had those bases. And I thought I was, as an 8-year-old, I thought I was really cutting edge when everyone was painting their bases goblin green, and I painted my bases goblin green, but I went, I'm gonna make them stand out. So I painted the edges in emerald green and was like, yeah, that's gonna look different. Oh, it looks goddamn awful. I found one in like my dad's attic the other day and was just like, oh, this is bad. It's just so bad. But I've always loved basing, and again, like Epic, for example, you can see some of those ones there where I was
Hmm.
like I want the bases to look like a story, like these, they're speeders. They should be going over some sort of ruined terrain. Or you've got the ones next to it where you've got like the Imperial Fist sort of going over or past a
A
sort of
statue kind
statue,
of thing, yeah?
that's sort of in a ruined sort of area. Where I was just like, I love basing. Like basing's one of the greatest things of the hobby. And actually, like when you again look at things like YouTube channels of people doing like military models,
Hmm.
they just come out with some amazing things nowadays that
Oh,
you
yeah.
can just see and do. There's a YouTube channel by a guy called Night Shift,
Oh, yeah,
who does
I watched
military
that one.
models.
He's
And
really
man,
awesome.
his stuff's great. It watching him reminds me of, I don't know if you ever got this. There's a book that came out which is like probably my favorite from a modeling point of view, probably my favorite Games Workshop product. And I worked for Games Workshop for about 6 months as a retail guy,
All right.
and I was just constantly selling this book. If someone came in and they were like, "So I want to do," yeah, you should buy this book. And it's the first Imperial Armor Masterclass book. And it
Okay.
goes through so many things of painting models and tanks and things like that. Like that, the mottled blue that you
Hmm.
saw me do, that's based on a mottled red that they do that's in that book.
Okay.
But I wanted to use a similar technique but do the blue. So I had to find a way of doing it blue. But it's sort of based on technique that was in there. And I love that book, and the bases and the scenes that they made are just fantastic. And Night Shift's tutorials are basically like the Imperial Armor book, where you're like, oh man, this is just brilliant knowledge that he just again shares freely on YouTube, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's fantastic.
And I mean,
Love
pretty
it.
much anything I know about weathering and stuff that I learned it from Night Shift. He's really
Yeah,
a great modeler.
yeah, it's so good, so good. And I mean, he's got the frustrating gift of making it look so easy. He's just
Yeah,
doing it.
yeah, no kidding.
It is, and he's just got this bit where he's just like, yeah, it looks a bit of a mess now, but it'll be okay. And then like 30 seconds later, it's just looking fantastic because he's got this like vision of where it's going and how it's going to work. and he's like got something, especially where he's doing the mud at the bottom, and you're like, you've just done all this paint job and it looked amazing, and you've messed it up by throwing all this stuff on it. It's like, but then we're going to do a few more layers and it will look great, and you're like, it's got wrong, and then a few layers later it's done, and you're just like, oh man, yeah, great channel, absolutely inspirational.
Okay, speaking of bases, still Earthman Brick, Ultra Smurfs, they're great models. I always use them for adding to my org bases as wounded soldiers.
Sorry, what was that? I didn't quite hear that. My speakers are a bit loud, quiet.
I'm sorry, I said Ultra Smurfs are great models. I always use them for adding to my org bases as wounded soldiers.
The blue contrasts very nicely with the green and the red that's going to be on the orcs. Great choice.
Okay, and one from Loosely Collected. When you posted that rifled barrel video, were you worried about somebody screaming that people will use it to make 3D printed firearms?
I'm I mean, I don't know much about firearms. I know that they have rifle barrels. I think if someone's going to be making a 3D printed firearm, the barrel being rifled or not is probably the least of anyone's concerns. I'm not sure a plastic rifle barrel would be. Plastic barrel would actually have a rifling effect.
I think he's not asking about people using that to make
Okay.
make it, because I think that sounds like a problem that will solve itself very quickly. But
Yeah.
I think it's, someone more like people carrying and going like, "Oh, but think of the children."
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I've got enough stuff in the models that I make that if people are really going to be if someone's looking to be offended, someone will generally be offended. So I'll just stick with it. My general rule is, as long as I'm just like, generally I'll just keep to myself, do the things that I like, and if someone's going to get offended by it, then they're welcome to be offended. I'll just go the other way. Like that's my way. And yeah, I was the one thing I was worried is actually in a similar vein was just because YouTube's algorithms can be quite like, no, cut this, like take this out. I was a bit worried that I
Okay.
was like, something might happen and it just might get auto taken down, or something like that might happen, but not so far. We'll see.
I mean, at the end of the day, just a tube with striations inside it. It's not like. I mean, you do some have very very interesting mechanisms that look like they could work. Like, let's see if I can find it in
Yeah.
here. Here, yeah, like the rack on this one.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's
But the guns,
again
I mean,
one of
like I say.
the, yeah, I mean, one of, again, as like, one of the things that I always want to happen is mostly, sometimes I really do go screw it. Like for example, I've made a 3-barreled Gatling gun recently, which just, like, that's never gonna work. Like, yeah, there you go.
This
Like,
one. Yeah.
yeah, that one. Like, in real life, where's the ammo go? Like, how's this working? So that would never work. But
You know,
generally, I
it looks so metal that you know, we'll give it a pass.
hopefully it's forgivable. But actually, yeah, one of the things I always like, which is again me being really pedantic, is I want my stuff to look like it would mechanically work. I'm not an expert enough to say that it would mechanically work, but like if I've got something and it needs to have pistons on it, or it would need to have pistons to work to be strong enough, I'm putting pistons on it. And things like that, like the assault pod that you've shown, I think you've got a photo of it open as well, and the open version has all of these pistons on it to try and make it work so that it would have the strength to force through metal. I don't know if that's like technically would. I don't know how strong pistons can be, especially in the future. But yeah, I kind of always want something that looks like it will function. I don't like the, like, oh, it's sci-fi, it'll be fine. Like, I want it to look like it works. Which is quite nice, because actually it's interesting that a lot of people comment on my stuff saying that, like, it looks like it will work. And it seems that there's a lot of people out there that want things that look like it will actually work. It looks like it could feasibly function. So yeah, that's that one. So yeah, you've got all the pistons inside that would open it up, and just like little stupid things, like, say for example, if you look inside it, there's a missile launcher,
Yeah.
because I was like, and someone's like, well, why the hell is there a missile launcher? And I was like, well, they're just breaking into an enemy spaceship. Like, there's gonna be huge amounts of enemies waiting there. So, and I don't. bear in mind that this is in 6mm. I'm not sure everyone's going to see this, but if you look just below that, there's an internal set of doors. So in my mind, what happens is that the melters burn the thing. This gets smashed into the sort of fortification that it's going in. The front doors open up, or basically the front doors stay closed while like the enemy just like expend a load of ammunition shooting this, and then the front doors open up, and this just missile barrage just destroys everyone inside this corridor, and then the internal doors open up and the Terminators stomp out. So it's just like little bits like that. To me, if it doesn't have a story, I'm not happy with it. So I love little bits like that, and that's again one of the reasons I wanted to get into this, because I want it to work, and I want it to have its own little story
All
that
right.
no one really knows about. It's like the rifle barrel. No one knows it's there. Like most of this is probably going to get just not even painted if someone 3D printed it. But I know it's there, and that makes me happy. And things like that. Like if you go up slightly, sorry, just to the side, yeah, the one that's most over to the right on that second row. So
Uh, this one?
that is, yeah, that one. So this is meant to be the for a before their Games Workshop had made a model. This was for the uh, Auto Sinister Titans,
Okay.
and in a bit of there's like a short novel for Auto Sinister, and it's only like 10 pages long, but it's basically about an Auto Sinister Titan, and it mentions that they have all of these alpha level psychers in these containment hubs, and they're basically being drained by the Titan. And that's how they get their energy to do all these like massive attacks. And in that, it's just saying things like so I wanted all this massive cabling to take the energy upwards. And then afterwards, and in the thing, it's mentioned that like they have to have these things in place in case one of these alpha level psychers just like the power's too much. So again, no one will ever probably see it, but I wanted the idea that like basically they can get killed and then just the body flushed out. So they've got all these little
Little
the
doors
little
at the
things
bottom,
at
yeah.
the bottom. So when they need to just dispose of this drained corpse, it just opens up and this like body and this what like amniotic fluid just drops out. And just like little stuff like that, just like no one ever knows it's there really or why it's there, but for me it's just really I love it. So yeah, that's the idea, is that this powers this like psychic array, which I sort of did as this almost skeletal eagle type thing, that would be over the top of it, which is totally different to the way Games Workshop went with what they wanted to
All
do.
right.
Like theirs is much more subtle and small, but I love the idea of this like imposing, ominous looking imperial eagle that's sort of quite skeletal in design. To be honest, I should probably go back to that and do an opposite one where I actually put wings on it, because that would look fairly cool as well. And actually have like the full wings sort of set up. But either way, that was a really fun project as well. And that was again me trying to learn some stuff using a modeling technique called sub D, so everything's quite rounded. But yeah, that was a lot of
That's
fun.
really, really cool. So Lucy collected is asking, sort of like the pods in the Matrix.
Yeah, yeah, that was exactly where that came from. I was like, as soon as it was said in the story, like as you said, pods in the Matrix. I was like, when it opened up and like Neo gets flushed out, I was like, yep, cool, this has to be there. So yeah, exactly like the pods in the Matrix. That was totally the thought process.
Okay, let's see. So, Quest Bortarian is saying, I do love the way that works out the story of how the piece will function.
Yeah, like yeah, it's as I said, for me, this is probably again like I was saying earlier. I love basing. Like models are always going to be models until there's a situation they're in, and then suddenly it just looks great and you're like, I can see the story, and that Imperial Armor book just brought that into my head. And again with like the 3D printing, like most of the stuff is just an extra weapon, but I love that my things can be different to other people's, and other people seem to like the same idea. That's like why people seem to buy some of the designs or go on the Patreon, so they get the designs that I come up with each month. And it's just, yeah, it's nice. I mean, we're in a hobby where most of the engagement is because of the background and the fluff and how detailed it is, and the fact that like you could look at any race and find just background information for days on something really cool. Like it's just such great fun. It's such a great narrative setting, and yeah, being able to add to that is always really fun.
Right, and Earthman Brick is also asking, I've seen a few third-party and official Hasbro toys that have working piston doors. Very easy to get working, and it looks badass. He's asking if the pistons here actually piston or stuff.
No, not at this scale. They're so thin that I don't think it would be feasible, because the bit where the piston would go into would be like the wall of that to then house the piston would be probably something like 0.2 millimeters, so it'd never stand up to it. Admittedly, I have seen a guy who took this and upscaled it by 400% and printed it for a 28 millimeter Titan. And he's got a massive industrial grade 3D printer, and it looked
Hey,
absolutely awesome. I loved it. He sent me a picture of it a while ago, or linked me to a picture of it, and I was like, "This is cool." Because
how large
again,
would it be at that scale?
oh, it
Yeah.
was massive. Like it almost, yeah, it was basically a brick. Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure if it was quite that big, but it was really really chunky. I mean, to give you an idea of how big it was, the distance from the missile launcher at the top to the bottom would comfortably fit a dreadnought in it. So
Hey,
it was massive. And what was really cool about it is because, I mean, nowadays, I say nowadays, this was only like a year and a bit ago, but like some of the 3D printers are so detailed now, you could see things on them. But like at 6 millimeters, you can't make out some of the details that I've put into this. Like it's just not possible. Like there's grating on the floor. You
yeah,
can't see that at six
no,
millimeters. Like you can sort of see that there's some texture, but you can't make out that there's this like this grating on the floor to help, because like this is going to be an absolute carnage. You don't want your space marines slipping over, so I'm having this grating. I just like, again, little things like that. Like I'm a pedant.
you
But
really did
when
think through this very carefully, didn't you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But when he printed it out, you can see all of that. I reckon at that scale, you could probably make the pistons work, and you could put pins in the doors so that the doors actually moved. I mean, that would be really cool. Admittedly, the pistons would then probably scratch off any paint that you put on them as they moved in or out. But so you'd have to, maybe if you printed them in plastic, then it'd be resilient enough. But yeah, I mean, that would be cool.
I just
I
realized that you put bolts in the back wall.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's right at the back. There's bolts. In fact, there's quite a lot of different panels there, and actually on the side there's a. I don't think I've got a picture of it there. I don't think you got a picture of it. But on the other side there's entrance doors, and on the
Oh, okay.
inside there's a view screen on the
Oh,
inside, which
come
you
on.
literally can't see. You literally can't see it. But why not?
Yeah, I mean,
But yeah, so the that printed out in 28 millimeters was
that, that,
absolutely awesome. I was loving that. I was like,
okay,
this is cool.
that's what I would call a vulgar display of power. I mean, good job.
Yeah, yeah. I when he did it, I was like, thank you, man. This is what I needed in my life, because it's just too big to print on a printer that I'd ever own. Yeah. What one day some ridiculous printing company will be like, we want to sponsor you by sending you a printer, and they'll like, it'll be some industrial thing and I can print one. But today is not that day. So till then I will live, it will always live in this guy's this guy's product that he made.
Okay, and what about this one? What's going on here?
These aren't my designs. So this one and the one that's below that, this has been made by a guy, and I mean, again, this shows what people are doing.
Hmm?
This is a guy that made this from, I think it was on Thingiverse, and and these files are free. Like he gave them out for free to make these. It is brilliant. I mean, that was this is when I had a smaller printer, and
Hmm?
that took a lot of time to print. But that was a great project. I've still got that. Where is that? There we go. Hang on, give me a second. That is that guy now.
1 sec. 1 sec. Okay, it's
So
clicking out a
yeah,
bit, but yeah.
there we
Ooh,
go. That
he's
that
a big
that is
guy.
that now. He's pretty damn big. I mean, a warlord comes up to his waist. So yeah, he's huge. But that was a very fun project. He was awesome. Yeah, there's such amazing stuff out there that people put out. It's just brilliant. I mean, admittedly, he puts that out for free because that's a bodge of lots of other bits that people have put
Mhm.
together. So he took other free files, scaled things up, scaled some things down, and put them together. Um, and it's surprisingly easy to do that now. You can use things like 3D Builder is a free program from Microsoft,
Mhm.
and from what I understand, he made that entirely in 3D Builder by
Just,
taking other 3D
but
files,
okay.
putting them together, and then 3D Builder does a very good job at sort of making a simplification join, and making it 3D printable. So
Right.
yeah, he did that entirely from other people's models that he then that were also free, and then put them together and then shared it for free. Yeah, I mean, absolutely awesome. So yeah, like you don't always have to go to something as hardcore as Blender to be able to do this sort of stuff. Like 3D Builder is never going to get as precise, but it's there and you can use it and you could make some simple things. And to be fair, it also has some great functions. Like every model I make gets put through 3D Builder because it has a great, even better than Blender, a great thing for working out if something's 3D printable or not.
All
It's
right.
fantastic. It's actually better. I find it better than the Cheeto box and the Lychee versions. It
Right.
does a better job of fixing it,
That's good to know.
which is crazy.
So let's see. There were some more other pictures I wanted to look at. Okay, so I remember this tutorial though for the
Yeah. The
jump
jump
packs.
Mark 6 jump pack. That is probably the highest selling thing that I've got on one of my
All right.
one of my stores. I think a certain company might have made a mistake of not bringing those out earlier because there's a lot of people that wanted them, which is really fun when you can see things. And yeah, I think you've got a picture of me with those sort of painted up. And then because I needed some other things, so those also so I needed some close combat arms. They made the arms and made the shoulder pads and then made the banner. So yeah, so basically the legs, body, head are mine. Plastic, and then everything else is just resin add-on bits. And yeah, I was really happy with those. They just seem to go together really nicely. With the original models, they're really fun.
Yeah, the one thing I found really interesting about that video in particular was that you're tooling a part to be very, very specific in scale. And I think you do it for all your parts, but in that video
Yeah,
in particular, we're going through the measuring with the calipers and all that stuff.
yeah. I mean, it. Making parts to go on other models definitely adds an element of additional, some people would say tedium. I'll go with challenge. An added element of challenge to make things fit. And yeah, you really do have to get there. I mean, I'm literally by my computer is always some calipers, like just because I'll need it. And yeah, it's just an a little extra bit of challenge, but it's really nice to make add-ons for things. As I said, I love it when my stuff is something that the average, like you just don't have out there, like,
Yeah,
and I
I
want
can
it
imagine.
now, and I'm not a patient person, so I'm definitely not going to wait 3 or 4 years for jump packs. So yeah, if you can make it yourself, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, and oh yeah, I want to talk about this one because this one looks epic.
So this is mostly not my model.
Okay,
This is actually a guy who was basically this is his first ever Kickstarter project, and he just wanted to make some, like, there's one of the Horus Heresy books, again, has a bit where the Space Marines are attacking an underwater sort of civilization.
okay.
And he was like, there should be some guard that go with that. I want to make some like nautical themed guard. So I was like, basically, I was just like, yeah, awesome, man. And he said, can can you sort of promote my thing? And I was like, well, sure. So this was actually a tutorial where I took his model and then just added the battle damage on his armor, on that thigh, and then on his shoulder pad, I sort of made it look more demony and sort of added in these like chaotic spikes that were coming out and sort
Okay.
of like fusing and twisting the armor. So basically, I was just doing a tutorial to use his models and try to give him a bit of publicity, and effectively also say like, look, I've taken his STL, and you can take something that's an STL and suddenly make it your own. Like 3D printing is also great because you can take a file and add to it or subtract from it. Like
Like
it's
a digital conversion kind of thing, yeah.
Exactly right. And yeah, like I've always loved sculpting things. And this was also quite a nice way to show off like you don't have to be particularly skilled at sculpting to be able to make these things in Blender. It's actually a very like I've never actually tried to. I need to at some point. I've never tried to sculpt a head from scratch on Blender. At some point, I probably should. It will probably go horribly, but because I'm not particularly great at things like that. But
Yes, you know, practice
Blender's
and
really
practice.
good. Yeah, exactly. It's all practice. But Blender's great for things like that. Like most of the time, if you can imagine it, you can do it, and that's what's so cool about it. And there's no limit between the sort of hard surface versus the sculpting. Whereas you get things like ZBrush, which is probably slightly better for sculpting in certain ways, though a lot of those functions are now in Blender. Like, yeah, so it's quite interesting how powerful Blender is in terms of its functionality.
Yeah, no kidding. So, I wanted to ask you, apart from the cables and the tentacle stuff, because you do quite a lot of cable decorations on your work, but I noticed, for example, you've got these kind of like battery packs and stuff. Do you keep a library of those and reuse them in your projects, or do you just, recreate them
A
for
little bit
every item?
A little bit of a mix. Admittedly, I didn't. I sort of know where they are in files, so I'll just take them off another file and then add them in. But in version 3 onwards of Blender, they've added this thing called an asset library, which is amazing that you can just go into Blender and be like, and go to my asset library and just drag anything you put in your asset library, you can just drag in from it. It's really, really cool. So I do actually need to make a lot of things like these fuel cells and things like that and actually get them in the asset library. And I've sort of never I'm always thinking of stupid new ideas that I want to do. So I've never had a chance to go back and actually sort of backdate all of my things into my asset library. I really need to do that at some point because it would like all the things like these. I sort of have things that I think of energy cells, things that I think of plasma cells, things that I think of melter cells. So like it would be good to have those in one place. But yeah, I have them somewhere. I just have to find them most of the time. So yeah, but it's if I was starting nowadays, that would definitely be on my top tips of doing that. Is like make sure you keep up to date with your asset library, or you're gonna regret it later on.
Yeah, it's going to end up all over the place. I think even just learning proper file management, and because you do lose I don't know about you, but I'm losing files all the time.
Yeah.
I know
Oh man,
they're
I like
somewhere there, but I'm not going to spend the time to look for them.
yeah, I mean, and I'm especially bad for this because I will hit the save button so often. Like even though I know that I've got it auto backing up, like my files for things like that mammoth pod that you've got there, I think by the time it's open, that's something like save number 120 odd. And these files aren't small, so like I've got a couple of like hard drives that are just there with files on and they're not actually on my laptop. So God, if something happened to one of those, I'd be like, "Oh, okay, right, well, we're making this one again." But yeah, I definitely should be a bit better at that than I am. It's a little shameful to be to be honest. I'm the one thing I'm not is organized. My fiance would say if like it drives her insane.
Okay, so one second. Just drop the link to the showcase in the chat again. So if anyone has any stuff they want to show off later, we can go over them. just drop them in the Discord there. And do you have any particular piece that you say that this is your favorite apart from what we're looking at earlier? I mean,
I will always have a massive thing for the exo armor. The first models that I did in Blender, so like that will always be a massive thing. The like they they were the first time, as I said, they were the first time I printed something myself, started painting them, and then suddenly there was a point where in my head it was a miniature. It wasn't something I'd made, and that will always hold a really sort of special place for me. Like I've got them painted. They're there, like they're in my sort of dining room on some shelves. And yeah, they're really, for me, they're a massive thing. I really love those as miniatures. Not just for the files. Like there's problems with the files. They're not perfect. Like I said, the trim isn't brilliant. I could definitely do loads of bits better if I did it nowadays. But there was just something about that first, oh my god, I've made a real thing that was like that was really, it was a big deal to me.
yeah, I can imagine
That
the sense of achievement from that.
Yeah, so that probably, if there's one project that I was particularly like, man, this has changed the way I feel about this,
Hmm.
it was probably this. I think off the back of these, I got my horrible laptop and accepted that I was going to need to buy a decent computer. I say computer. I bought another laptop, which is definitely now showing its age, and that was well timed because that happened just before lockdown, and
Oh,
suddenly I
all
had
right.
a laptop. But yeah, suddenly I had a laptop that was able to do things for a very long, for a 2 year
Yeah,
period. And also when we came out the other end of lockdown, things like graphic cards were so expensive that it would have been hideously expensive.
yeah, no kidding.
Um, so yeah, this was sort of the thing that inspired me to drop quite a lot of money on a laptop. And I've never regretted it since then. I mean, admittedly, at some point, and that's why I have the Patreon channel. The Patreon channel there, like anything I make off the Patreon channel is just getting put aside so that one day I can buy a actual, not a like desktop computer that will have a lot more power to it. That's pretty much the only reason the Patreon's there, because people have said, "Oh, we want to send you some money," and things like that. But all that money gets kept aside so that one day I can do that. Because I mean, you sort of get to the point where to do some of the things that I want to do, it's gonna be, you're talking about a computer that's going to be comfortably in the like 2 to 3 thousand range, because once you get to really high uh vertex counts and things like that, and polygon counts, you just have to have a computer that's
Yeah,
powerful, and there's
totally.
sort of no way of getting around it. Like I mean this was done on a Microsoft Surface.
Oh, all right.
And two, which was and basically like just anything like booliening something together, I'd be booliening the rivets onto the chest, and I'd set that running and basically have to go and do something for about 2 minutes and then
Oh,
come back and hope it had worked. And that was the whole of it. It was it, and then if something went wrong, you were like, "Whoop, okay, let's get back on this." It was it was long. But yeah, that if there's any models that hold a sort of particular place in my heart, it is those. Um, and yeah, still got the physical ones. There are definitely models that have sold better, and I've used more. I mean, I don't think I think I used them for a game once, but there's always going to be something really special about those.
okay, so you mentioned that there are things that you want to do, but you don't have the processing power to do them right now. But is there a thing that you were like, okay, I want to do this thing, but I will wait until I have more experience or whatever. Not in terms of computing power, literally in terms of what you think you're capable of right now. Or do you just dive in? How do you
I'm going
look
to
at
be
it?
honest. Most of the time, I will generally recklessly dive in, but mostly because the one thing that's really difficult about Blender, I say difficult about Blender, difficult about finding things for Blender is online in terms of tutorials, is that until you're trying to do something, you don't know that you don't know how to do it.
Yeah,
So
I get
you've
you.
got to try something to then be looking for it. Now, what can be really painful is then trying to work out what the hell to look up to try and find a tutorial. So I try to label all my tutorials as clearly as I can, and then try to introduce new things that someone would be like, "Oh, I never knew you could do that," or like there's some sort of hidden add-on that people didn't know about. Like, for example, there's a wall building add-on for sort of stone walls in Blender that's a little bit hidden, and I've had people being like, "Oh, can I do this with?" Oh you've got the building there. So you've got people who are like, "Oh, can you show me how to do insert thing, like build a stone wall?" Or people a lot of the time would do that with, especially this bit here, with things like alpha textures. But that doesn't
Yep.
work if you want to 3D print it. You'll get these really ugly seams, or I mean, it can work, but I wouldn't, and it would create a huge, like, my computer would die if I tried to do this with alpha textures. Like, there would just be too many pixels, too many, well, not pixels, too many
Vertices.
vertices.
Yeah.
Whereas this, each thing's a block. So actually, I mean, there's a lot of stones, but basically each stone is made up of only 8
Yeah.
vertices.
Yeah.
Whereas effectively, I mean, that means that in this scene, there's, I don't know, at this point, there's probably maybe a couple of thousand vertices or something like that. But if this was done with sculpting, this would be in the millions or tens of millions of vertices, and my computer would be dead. Um, so there are things that definitely hold me back, and sculpting is probably the big one. The one thing that's tricky about running the YouTube channel while it being a sort of side thing and having a main job, and teaching takes up quite a lot of your time, is at some point I really want to dive really into sculpting things. But that's it's going to be a really big thing to do that, and I will go in that in a stupid way. Like, I've got a few ideas of things that I'd like to sculpt, starting probably something without a face and then moving on to something with a face, or I'll do something stupid like 3D scan my own face and modify it from there, or something like that. But yeah, sculpting is one of the things where I'm like, not from a ability point of view, like, I know I don't have the ability to sculpt things really well. I have the ability to learn to sculpt well, and I will do that. It's just having the time to do it at this point,
Yeah, I can imagine.
is the bit that's the challenge. Like, it's really hard to find that much time to learn a skill from scratch, because it's almost a new side of Blender.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Is Yeah, is going to take a lot of time. So that's probably the only thing. And also, if you want to sculpt well, I probably need a computer that's more powerful. So there is definitely that as a limiting
Yep.
factor
Yep.
as well. So that's sort of a bit of a double whammy there, because you don't want that to be slow. But other than that, I generally have just gone straight into it and tried to work it out. I mean, the one thing that's probably that I found helpful is, because I did previously make things physically, I got a good idea of, well, okay, I need to do this, and I can sort of compartmentalize things into different parts of a project. Like, it's a big project, but it's made up of lots of different elements, and as long as I can recognize what those elements are and then learn that skill, that'll be fine. And that's sort of the way I generally go into things, and it works in Blender. And that's like, if you decide one day I'm going to learn Blender and you don't go in with an idea of what you want to make, you will quite quickly probably run out of steam and feel like you can't do it. Because if you just try and go online and go Blender tutorials, there will be millions, and they'll all be on different things. And I mean, the one thing I do find useful now is occasionally I'll watch a Blender tutorial and be like, okay, that's giving me an idea, I could use that in this way. But most of the time, it was, I wanted to do something, so I had to go and find out how to do it. And that's what's great about Blender and YouTube. You can just dive right in and hopefully get there.
Yeah. With regards to sculpting on Blender, one thing that I found helped out was using a drawing tablet, a pressure
Yeah,
sensitive one.
I have got a drawing tablet, and it's there by my computer. It's just off to the side here. And to be fair, I do use it for things like, I was using it for whenever I do battle damage. Most of
Hmm.
my battle damage is done by sculpting, so I'll use it for things like that. And those videos where I was sort of making the demonic growths, I'll use it for things like that. Any sort of weird, gribbly, chaosy bits. Um, tend to have something that's being used, the graphics tablet. It's an amazingly useful thing. As like I wouldn't be without it, just for the low level stuff that I do. But yeah, I think you're definitely right. A
Yeah,
graphics tablet at some point is probably a must.
yeah. In terms of the thing is that in terms of understanding digital sculpting, it was like I did some physical sculpting before, and not having pressure. If you're just using a mouse, there's no pressure
Yeah,
control. So once you put pressure back into the equation, okay, now this makes a lot more sense now. I'm still
yeah. I mean,
terrible at sculpting digitally, but I can do it.
yeah, having that feel is really big. Someone told me a tale once that they went up to Nottingham and saw that the digital sculptors that work for Games Workshop have these pens, but they have it's on an arm, and that they can actually while they're looking at what they're doing, they can see the mouse pointer on their screen. But the thing that they're holding has resistance, so you can almost like run your mouse over, like this pencil over, or pen that you're holding over the face of something, and you can feel it, and then it adds resistance that then you push in, it almost has a clay-like feel of like you
Ooh.
pushing into it. I was just like, I don't know how true that is, I've never seen that myself, but oh my god, that sounds brilliant to be able to like, yeah, almost like run your fingers over the thing you're sculpting. Just sounds amazing. I dread to think how much something like that costs, but I mean, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think that the value would be calculated in kidneys, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That would definitely be a pricey one. It's like one of the other ones that I saw recently that it came up, and someone's like, "Do you reckon it would be really helpful to get one of these?" I was like, "If you can afford one, you're probably asking the wrong person, because to me that is just madness." Is you like the like Tony Stark-esque, it generates a 3D image in front of you now.
Oh,
There's a
good.
company
Right.
that have made these boxes that can do that now. And I've seen something from Blender in one of these boxes on a video, and I was like, oh my god, I want that so much. Oh, it'd be amazing. Okay, it's £14,000. No, I'll be all right. I'll
Oh,
leave
okay.
that. Yeah, I'll have a car or something like. But yeah, but it looked fantastic, and it looks so surreal. And you're like, bearing in mind, like, let's say 10 years ago, 3D printers was something you're never going to own at
Yeah, yeah.
home, and you're sort of getting to the point where you're like, at some point soon, this will be affordable, or may be affordable. It's an exciting time to be a hobby geek.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the whole internet, I mean, was like science fiction. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we've gone from that to, hey, we've got machines that can print out things, solid
yeah,
things.
yeah. It's honestly, it's yeah, it's a really exciting time to be in the hobby and
Oh,
things
yeah,
like
for sure.
this, and just to explore new technology and how it really works. It's great.
Ooh, been going for a while. I would like to look at what everyone else has been throwing up in the
Yeah,
Discord. Okay,
totally. Yeah, please.
you okay? Coming up. So first one up, Earthman Brick. We have Toy Bashed Gladiator Megatron.
Nice.
Right.
That's really cool. I don't know the original model to do that, but
I
I love that it looks. As you're saying, I love that it looks like it could work. Like, it's got the massive fans, it's got the cabling. It Yeah, things like that are awesome.
Yeah, I know. You know what? I think actually prefer this one than the original toy because this one looks chunky and it's like could do some damage. This one is like
Yeah, I was about to say, it looks like it looks pretty imposing.
this one is like help! I'm going to fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that looks awesome.
Okay, this one is from Lawrence for Dirty Basement Terrain, and he's working on this, I believe, 1987 Games Workshop Fortress. So he's restoring it and putting in the doors and stuff.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it's a piece of history we're looking at there.
Yeah. Is that the Games Workshop one? I didn't think the stone was as good as that on the Games Workshop one. That's really nice. Well, I
This
wonder where the doors have come from. Those doors look awesome.
the doors he made himself now. The walls are from the 1987 Mighty Fortress kit. So that's expanded polystyrene.
Wow. Man, I remember that. I remember playing on that. I can't remember it looking quite that good. But yeah, that's awesome. Those doors are really nice.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to see how that looks when it's finished because
Yeah, that will look.
Lawrence does go the extra mile as well.
Has he said if the door's open or not?
Uh, I have no idea. Lawrence, do the doors open if you're listening? I have no idea, but I'm sure he'll answer at some point if he's there.
That looks fantastic. Love that.
Okay, next up, this is from the Dungeon Minister, and let's see. This first one is from his eldest son, and the second one he made together with his youngest.
I feel I'm about to see some filler foam coming up, which is one of my favorites.
Is it? Huh?
Oh, it fit. I've never used it to make terrain. Actually, no, that's a lie. I have used it to make terrain. But filler foam is like that Thunderhawk that I showed you at the beginning.
Yeah.
That is entirely filled with filler foam because
Oh, okay.
because you make this outer shell and it's so delicate, and you're just like
Oh, of course, and you
£8 can of filler foam, and suddenly it's all solid.
ah,
It's
that makes a
great.
lot of sense, and it doesn't add a lot of weight either. Nice. So we've got this nice setup here. So the graves are movable. This is quite reusable. I like this,
Yeah.
and this is going places.
It's got filler foam has such a great texture. It's so usable.
Yeah,
It's got something very igneous about it. Like it looks sort of like goopy. Love it.
yeah. Okay, so let's see. More from Earthman Brick, disabled toilets, and custodian room.
See, this is the stuff. Like it's when you've got these little details, like the fire extinguisher and the fire extinguisher signs that are just awesome. Like whenever I make terrain, I'm always like, I need to find some little posters or things like that to put on. It's just really cool. I love that.
Okay, so one tip from Earthman Brick from Steve was what he does is he gets these catalogs. I'm not sure. I think catalogs in health and safety catalogs. I think, and they've got all these hazard signs and stuff. He just snips them out and sticks them on the train.
Nice.
Oh, and okay,
And I imagine that would be probably a relatively water resistant. If it's those sort of magazines, it'll be like a glossy magazine,
kind
so
of
they'll
thing.
be
Yeah,
quite
yeah, yeah.
resistant and stuff.
Okay, and I can see that these are cable ties.
Oh, really?
He
Oh,
does like
yeah.
he
That's
does like
so
to use his
clever.
cable ties.
Yeah, that's really clever. I mean, that's going to save some money. That looks a little grim, but love the detail.
Yeah, he's got a thing about toilets, especially he's got a fine line of toilet mimics as well, which are pretty terrifying.
That that's great.
Oh, I like this.
The weathering on yeah, that's awesome. There's oh man, I've forgotten his name. I have to find this guy. I know there's loads of people out there, but there's oh, that's gonna kill me. There's someone I follow on Instagram that does things like this, and it's those modelers that just make things that look you just look at them and you're like, I can't tell what scale this is. I can just see the detail and it looks fantastic. And it's all like all these little things that this guy's got on, like the watermarks and stuff like that,
Yeah,
just come to get like anything by it's like what we were saying with Night Shift. You do one of those techniques by itself and it wouldn't look great, and then you put it together with other things and it looks
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, makes sense.
Really cool. Love that. Does he use this for gaming? I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
That's cool.
I'm not sure if it's for Zone Alpha or EZD6 or he does play a few post-apocalyptic games, so could be one of them.
That's quality.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. Here's Questboard Terrain. This is for the natural challenge. Yeah, we're doing a natural material challenge, which is due in, I believe we said October. And the challenge is to use to build something which is mainly built of natural materials.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, I see it. Okay, you're going for a river here, Kim?
So he's using the wood and stone.
Say again?
It looks like he's using the wood as stone, or is it water?
I think it's
This looks really cool.
bark and yeah,
Yeah,
water. Nice.
that's really nice.
That's a really good idea.
Oh, that looks cool. Man, I'd never thought of that. It really looks like it's flowing.
Yeah.
That's really clever. The reason I like that, and I think that's so clever, is like for Blender, you can bring in textures, and people are always using weird textures as different things. So you get a lot of people using like wood bark textures, but they'll make it so it's less extreme and it suddenly looks like skin, like the
Ah,
slight
okay.
like texturing skin. And I'd never thought of that wood having like something that looks like a flow of water. That's so clever.
Nice. Okay, let's see. Scattered terrain, very much a work in progress, but the concept is strong. Character markers for invisible characters. Okay, so let's see. I will be painting them to match all my other mini bases, then paint the footprints in again with black. Ah, okay.
That's really fun. I like that.
And playing with cutting designs into circular cross-stitching mesh. Okay. Right, I can do.
Sorry, has he used a machine to do that, or is that done by hand? Because that is incredible.
I think so. This is a cross-stitching match, and she just snipped out parts of it to make this. This would be a grid normally.
Wow, that's
So,
cool.
so all those parts have been snipped out, and I mean, you could use this as a template. You could use
Yeah,
literally glue it onto a floor. You could,
that I mean that as a center of like a temple or something would look amazing.
yeah. I mean, I wonder if you could put pieces of plastic on it and then color them in different colors. That would be really good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh man, that as a stained glass window would look fantastic.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. Wow, that's really great.
Okay. Let's see. Loosely collected. Oh, he's been busy here. So we've got parts of his archway going here.
Looks like he's been busy drinking.
No, he did tell us
That,
already
that's
that.
that's some dedication to the cause.
Yeah, he already did tell us that they're collected from various relatives. So you know.
Ah, that's really nice.
Oh, this looks interesting. This is. Ah, okay.
That's cool.
Going a bit fast because there's a lot of photos on here. So okay, so he's literally building the whole thing around the viaduct.
Yeah. Has he got one of what he's going to put in the center of it?
I'm not sure. That's another building he built.
Oh, that I love.
Oops, sorry.
I don't know what this is for, but there's a game from Games Workshop called More Time,
I'm
and
pretty
there
sure
are
this is
groups
for more time. Yeah.
on Facebook, and the stuff that people are coming like. Look at this, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that game. It's still one of my favorite games even after all these years.
It's absolutely brilliant game.
Hey, speaking
But
of that, there's look one of the original buildings.
oh yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, speaking of more time, we had Thomas Pirinen over in I think it was yeah 2 weeks ago. A great guy. We had a stream with him.
Oh, amazing.
That's a pretty brilliant table he's got going on here.
Yeah, that is going to be a pleasure to play on. I see a liberal use of what look like coffee stirrers.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure if they are. Maybe they're not. They look a bit wider than that, but I always used to love things like that. Couldn't go into a fast food place without taking a million coffee stirrers.
I know, right? Okay, I think these are more on the lollipop stick
Yeah,
size, but same principle. That's pretty awesome work.
these are great.
Okay, so let's see. Earthman Brick practicing sculpting baby doll heads on pistachio shells. Trying to do two challenges at the same time. Okay,
like that.
okay, I'll be honest, I've seen uglier babies in my time, so
It looks suitably disturbing.
okay, how I made the fire extinguisher. Okay, so that's a bit of sprue. That's a bit of, I'm guessing this is from a lighter, I guess.
Okay,
And the wheelchair, I can
that's
say
really clever.
this is some kind of Lego piece, I think, and more sprue bits. I'm pretty sure that's part of a cable tie.
That's so clever.
Yeah, I mean, with most of his builds, we always have this game of spot the cable tie. Because there is always one. Ah, okay.
Oh, is it more of the same?
This is scatter terrain again. It's showing how she made the previous one. Just a different example. So the mesh used above would be like this one, but the other one is round. But same principle.
Wow,
So it starts like this,
that's genius.
and then cutting off the pieces to make these larger gratings. Oh, these look nice.
Yeah. Man, they look great. Like those ones that you had that you were just pointing at, they would like make fantastic things like portcullises and stuff like that. They look fantastic.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, this is used for cross stitch or stuff. I know they call it granny grating, and it's used for some kind of needlework, but I'm not sure. I think it's called cross stitch mesh. Cross
I
stitch
I
mesh.
I know what I'm going to be looking for on Amazon once I've finished this conversation.
Okay. All right, and these are the same things we're looking at here.
Yeah,
Wired together. Ah,
combined
that's very
together.
good. Nice.
That's cool. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's
I foresee a project in the future.
Okay, I think that's about everything in there. That's some lovely work, people.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Okay, let's see. This- Okay, so Loosely Collected is saying he bought a 1000 coffee stir stick pack on Amazon. Alright, that's out of coffee stir sticks.
Yeah.
Okay, cable ties are useful. I make ammo cans and feeds for autoguns on gaslands. Nice. And yeah, Scatter Terrain confirmed it's cross-stitch mesh, and she wants to do a symmetry fence. Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, those are cool.
Okay, Neil, so I think I've kept you for almost 2 hours now, so I think it might be
Oh,
time to
yeah,
wrap up.
just all done.
Really had
Awesome.
fun. That was a really fun conversation. Do you have anything else
Cheers, man. Thank you
to?
so much for having me on. It's
Hey, it
been
was a
awesome to chat
it
to
was
you.
a pleasure, man. Anything else you want to tell the people before we sign off?
No, honestly, just thanks for having me on. If anyone's ever interested in anything 3D design wise, check out the channel.
Links in
And
the description
always,
down there.
yeah, always feel free to comment if you've got any questions, because in the end, the channel's there because I want people to be able to find out how to do things, and if then people put in some ideas or something they don't know, I can generally point them to if I've already done a tutorial channel on the channel where it is, or add it to my list of things to do, because if you're looking for it, someone else is probably looking for it as well. Is generally the way it is. So yeah, check that out, and thank you for having me on.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. Great talk. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for watching, and have a great week. Bye.
Cheers, man.